Welcome to Converge. Here we do socially conscious art and design programming that has a positive impact for the community. And we're so excited to have Nott with us and Clayton Hansen tonight. So my name is Alicia Irisari Melo. My husband Eric and I founded Converge. And I want to go ahead and introduce you to Michael and Lily. So Nott is our featured artist for his show, Good Morning America, How Are Ya? Exploring the social, political, and religious tensions here in Nashville. He has been compiling work for this show for 4 years now. Heavily shooting downtown Nashville and just really capturing so many different facets of our community and the challenges that we face. He's also an art director, and Lily is an author. She has written 3 books, including Word of Mouth, Nashville Conversations, and that is a local bestseller. And she also interviews for clients such as HCA and Gresham Smith. So we're so happy to have both of you here, and I will go ahead and turn it over to you, Lily. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And that was a wonderful introduction. Usually people like to mispronounce my name. No, I'm super excited to be here. I'm a big fan of Michael just as a human being, but as an artist especially. And he has such an interesting background. My background is a biographer, so I would say Michael, in my eyes, is a very easy subject to talk about. So maybe we could just begin by talking a little bit about your career. You come from Wyoming originally. You moved to Austin, Texas, where you studied graphic design and then photography. Maybe you could just walk us through your career.
Yeah, I was kind of fresh off the farm from Wyoming and got to Austin, Texas, kind of the beginning of late 70s, I guess, and just was really immersed into the art scene there, music scene, punk rock scene in Austin. And I really kind of arrived, I guess I'd been going to school for about a year and lived in another part of town, was kind of out of the loop of things, and moved into a co-op near the university, kind of down in the heart of things. And I mean, within a couple of months, everything really changed for me. I'd signed up for a class of art classes of like photography 1 and 2 and a history of photography 1 and 2. Mm-hmm. And the history of photography was taught by Helmut Gernsheim, who was the eminent collector of photography, wrote basically the big textbook of art photography, was teaching that class. And then the photography class was taught by Garry Winogrand, famous street photographer. So suddenly I was just immersed into these, luminary figures in the history of photography to take classes from, and that kind of spurred me on into the photography world.
And I know I hadn't actually heard of Garry before, we first I had our chat, but maybe you could tell us a little bit about the influence he had on you, because I know that he shot in a very similar, fast, spontaneous style.
Well, he comes from the background of what was kind of called the School of New Photography in New York, that kind of coalesced around an art director, Brodovich, who was the art director of Vanity Fair. It was Harper's Bazaar magazine, and he kind of ran a night school of photographers, and it's amazing the names that came out of those people that he influenced and taught. It was like Avedon and Dean Arbus, Winogrand, Robert Frank, the list goes on and on of people that he influenced. So definitely Garry Winogrand was out of that era of late 50s, early 60s. And Winogrand's stuff was kind of interesting because, as we all know from our history, early 60s there was a lot of tension about nuclear proliferation in the world. They were doing nuclear drills in schools, and Winogrand shooting on the streets really kind of captured that thing. In fact, there's a book of his called The Uneasy Streets of Garry Winogrand, and he really captured that era of time in the United States.
And he also, I mean, from my understanding, shot a lot, like you do. I mean, incessantly.
Incessantly,
Did he impressed that upon you as a young photographer?
Yeah, he shot unbelievable amount of film. In fact, I would say, a large percentage of it has never been even developed. He would, when I was taking his class, by this time he was fairly famous. He had teaching assistants that follow him around, that had loaded cameras to keep handing him. So, he was just shooting and shooting and shooting. He would shoot, garbage sacks full of film.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, seriously, amazing amount of images. And again, it's kind of a in the art world of what do you do with, he's since passed away, what does the estate do with undeveloped or so that's kind of an ongoing debate in the art world of what do you do with that imagery.
Mm-hmm.
So
So afterwards, all right, so from my understanding, so you studied photography under Garry, then you became a graphic designer and worked for several city magazines,
Yes.
And then you proceeded to become an art director.
My core background is publication design, although I worked in advertising as a creative director. And as a creative director, for years I hired a lot of photographers. So I was around photography a lot, although I wasn't really commercially shooting, but I was directing photography and hiring photographers. And this is back in the day when photographers actually could make money at the game. There were actual budgets. Those days are kind of dried up and gone at this point. But so I was around photography a lot and photographers and studios, and so I kind of kept up with it, in that era of doing work.
I would assume that would be like a huge advantage, you having laid out all of these magazines and understanding, I mean, not just how to take a good photo, but I mean how to compile photography together
Yes,
to make,
definitely,
a cohesive project.
Yeah, definitely. Publication design really ingrained that in me, for years of how to deal with telling a story and pacing and all those kinds of things you do graphically in photography.
So the first time we talked about your book, you had said that it was about people, places, and opinions related to politics in Nashville. Before this project, to my understanding, you had just kind of shot as like a hobbyist, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this was like your first like serious endeavor. So why this subject matter? I mean, it's heavy material.
Well, yeah, I was shooting on the street, probably 3 years really seriously leading up to this material that's in the show. And I slowly got used to shooting people in that 3 year period, and how to deal with shooting with people. And I was going to, basically was going to anywhere where there was a crowd. And so, that kind of was the impetus of, it didn't matter what it was. It could be a car race, or it could be a parade, it could be a circus, whatever. Anywhere there was a crowd, I'd go and shoot. And, as things progressed, in the last 4 years, there were a lot of protests, the Women's March, the first Women's March, Black Lives Matter protests, the children's gun violence protest. I mean, there were just, and so I started showing up at a lot of those. And at that time, I was the creative director at the Contributor, the homeless newspaper.
Mm-hmm.
I was laying that out and shooting a lot for the newspaper. So it was like kind of a dream job and of course, very much a lot of political stuff. And it gave me a press pass and an into shooting, a lot of events. I could get into the press pit when Hillary came in the last election a couple of times. It just gave me access to being a actual photojournalist, which I really wasn't, but I was shooting a lot of that material. So, over time, this stuff started really kind of surfacing that's in the show.
Well, I find it interesting because I began my background in music journalism, so to get a press pass into like Lollapalooza or something was like my dream job, and I love that yours would be like a Trump rally.
I know it's really exhilarating.
Well, let me ask you this. I'm curious, what is it about crowds? Because I remember the first time you and I had met and had coffee and hung out for a few hours, and you had given me this really beautiful manifesto you'd written, which was, just talking about your love for taking crowds and then creating, still images from that. Why crowds?
Yeah, I just like chaos of crowds. I mean, a lot of times I'll be out shooting and I'll be like, if I wasn't taking pictures, I'd just be down here looking at people. I just like people watching in general, and the chaos of crowds. And the other thing about shooting crowds generally, whether it's a protest or a parade or whatever, everybody's out there to be seen. Mm-hmm. And it's somebody taking their picture is no big deal. Mm-hmm. And it's just and everybody else is taking it's like in the world at any event, everybody's got their cell phone out, there's photographers, it's expected. Mm-hmm. And in a lot of cases, anybody that's out with a protest sign or is there to be seen and get their picture taken. So it's not it's not a stretch to be doing that.
That was one thing I noticed when I was looking at your book this morning, and then even the photos on the walls, is how everyone's a willing participant. Mm-hmm. And maybe I just was thinking about it from the perspective, I just spent almost 2 weeks in the UK, and it's the opposite there. Like, you would not be taking photos of you and your friends having dinner. It's very taboo. And here it's like, that's just the thing. Like, we're out, in a crowd. Of course we're going to take selfies. So did you find that people, really, it's like the culture of like exhibitionism?
Oh yes, definitely. Yeah. I mean, I mainly shoot on Lower Broadway. I'd say that's the core of where I shoot. And down there, it's, people are down there to be seen. And you see those tourists down there, they've spent the last month picking out their outfit that they're going to wear. And, and you give them some attention, fueled by some alcohol. Mm-hmm. They want to get their picture taken.
Sure.
It's not a stretch. And I have never had anybody say anything to me otherwise.
About
it may happen tomorrow, but I've never had any pushback ever. Mm-hmm. And part two of that is I'm usually running pretty fast. I'm not lingering around. I'm moving through a crowd and shooting. Mm-hmm. And or if I see somebody I want them, to kind of stop, I'll ask them, and usually I'm out of there before they can even really kind of pose. Mm-hmm.
Sure.
And I don't want anything too posed. I want kind of a natural look of things. So.
Maybe we could talk a little bit about your love, because I know even when you and I were emailing earlier today, you have a great love, and it sounds like it's a lifelong love for socially conscious art. And once again, I'm sure it was a gold mine the last couple of years. Having so much to photograph, but maybe you could speak a little bit to why that's your area of interest and now expertise.
It's got a rich history of photography that does actually change people's minds. I mean, back to the beginning of photography, in the 1800s, photographers that shot, child labor, in factories, changed those people's perceptions. People that shot, the slums and tenements in New York, overcrowding and, shine the spotlight on bad landlords and really changed. It has a power of change.
Sure.
So, that the show a couple months ago at the Frisk, the Dorothy Lang show, the whole farm administration, kind of really shined a spotlight on conditions, and that was a federally funded program to do that.
Yeah, I remember when I saw that show, a friend of mine had said, I feel like everyone needs these photos on their walls to remind us when we're having, a shit day, like it's not that bad, and I kind of felt like that looking at these photos in a way too. I mean, you touch on some really, traumatic stuff, for lack of a better word, and
so the kind of the history of social conscious photography kind of was more in the area of, I would say, photojournalism. Life magazine was out and in the 40s and 50s and spotlighted a lot of conditions around the world through photography. So it was more of a photojournalist sort of focus. That sort of shifted in the 50s, especially with some of these new photographers that came along, particularly Robert Frank, that they were spotlighting conditions, but it was a little more oblique than just straight photojournalism. And kind of the rise of photo books took it out of the hands of magazine editorial, newspaper editorial, and put it more in the hands of the artist to tell their story. But again, you can take one photograph and it will tell the entire story, like the Dorothea Lange, the migrant mother and her children photo. I mean, you look at that photo and it tells the whole story. And, in the case of Robert Frank, in his book, The Americans, there's a photo of side of a bus and people on the bus, and it just basically tells the whole story of segregation in that one photo, that place and time. And the attitude on people's faces, the white lady in the front, in the center there's the children hanging out the window, and in the back, there's African American people, and the attitudes on everybody's faces just tells that whole story of that era. And just the power of that is just really, really, really interesting. And then when you get to, into the 60s and people like Garry Winogrand, again, they were taking a much more oblique look at it. It wasn't like it was more existential sort of imagery that they were practicing. It was sort of like Freelander. And what happened that really changed things around from a art history, art and culture thing was, I believe it was 62, the Museum of Modern Art put on a show that was called New Documents. It was Lee Freelander, Deanne Arbus, and Garry Winogrand together. And that was a real game changer of he kind of took it out of documentary photography into another realm. And three interesting photographers, because I owe a lot to my work owes a lot to Deanne Arbus. From a structural standpoint, it's symmetrical, person in the center kind of thing. Whereas Garry Winogrand would be more imagery that the content kind of outbalances the form. There's so much going on in it, so, and same with Freelander, so it's a really interesting contrast to that show, those three photographers.
But I find it interesting because even though you're obviously very liberal, I mean, you're just kind of giving, one can almost think you were a Trump supporter from looking at your book. Just because, you do cover a lot of very conservative events. But I get the sense you're just trying to give like a general overview of what's happening and sort of the madness of it all.
Yeah. Interesting. I've been to a lot of events where I bounce back and forth across the street, and any Trump rally is going to have a lot of protesters, and it's kind of funny to be bouncing back and forth across the street doing that. I've been to some Antifa things where it's the battle lines are definitely drawing, and bouncing back and forth across that. And I know some of the Antifa guys, and they know me, so it's not like I'm some sort of interloper. Generally, Antifa and Black Lives Matter people, they set up a perimeter, and they don't really allow photography. They're very, they're trying to really control their message. So, but they do know me, and I can move around in those situations.
So what were some of the most interesting events that you photographed? I mean, you must have done hundreds. And how did you even pick them? Like, I'm imagining you sitting in your apartment, be scrolling through the newspaper, circling them.
I just got plugged into a lot of activists and stuff, and most activists have prep meetings. Go to a few of those and kind of get to know people. And but the most interesting one it wasn't here in Nashville, it was in Portland, Tennessee, and in Portland there was a restaurant bar that was once a month was renting out their space and having drag shows, and the city council got all up in arms and decided to ban drag shows from Portland, Tennessee, little town of Portland, Tennessee.
Oh my gosh.
So there was going to be a vote of the city council, and so there was a protest. So on one side of the street you had all the people protesting, a lot of drag performers, which always makes for great photography. And the other side of the street you had some street preacher and his whole congregation with megaphones yelling at the people across, and a lot of people going back and forth and yelling at each other. And then inside the city council building was just a packed house of people for this vote. It was sort of, because it was such a compact little, it's not a very big town, but all these people descended on the town to protest.
Well, the dichotomy of that.
Yeah, it was just the street preachers and that stuff.
It sounds like also, it's interesting because looking at these photos, you could almost it sounds like even though these were very tense events, you had a good time. You would talk to me about how even when you were downtown, you made friends with the bartenders and the people that worked there.
Just general jubilation of, people in public in a party situation, and I would say a protest is a party situation. Everybody's pretty happy. There's some people that are mad and whatnot, but in protest. But generally, people are there to be seen and do their thing. And in general, if you were to walk around, like you say, walk around London in the business section where everybody's, going to the bank and going to their jobs, and they're not too keen on pesky photographers taking their picture.
Sure.
But in a party situation, it's like, yeah, hey, here we go, So, especially, it's like Lower Broadway is just, it's like shooting fish in a barrel, because people are just out there to, to be seen. Definitely.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, great. Well, I feel like we kind of touched on most of the stuff that I wanted to. Was there anything else that you really wanted to say about the project? What's been the reaction so far? Once again, I think you did it in Nashville. This is a city that you obviously have, been really committed to arts-wise. What do people think about it?
I think you could have probably shot this anywhere, particularly. This stuff's going on, from Cincinnati to Florida. This could be, you could produce this stuff anywhere, because there's protests and stuff going on, continuously everywhere. especially in the last 4 years. So I think it's you know, it's something it's not Nashville specific. You know, I mean, you wouldn't really, unless you knew Nashville, you wouldn't even know where you are here.
Well, what about these photos were very Nashville? Was there anything about them besides, I mean, you know, the backdrops? I mean, or was there anything that you found particularly interesting about the way the people of Nashville reacted to politics? I mean, the city must have played into the project somehow.
A little bit, but I think, you know, I think this, you know, this could be produced anywhere. And there's a really great book out. He's a photojournalist. I believe he shoots for Reuters. Mark Peterson. It's called Political Theater. And because he shoots for Reuters, he's in the press pool at every Trump rally, every protest, and if you want to really kind of dive into that world, he's got a great book. It's called Political Theater. But of course, he shoots for Reuters, so he travels all over the country, doing really, really great stuff. But again, his stuff is all famous people that are in. You know, it's not just randos in the protest groups. So I really admire his stuff.
Did you ever interact with any of these people afterwards? Like, I'm curious if they even know that they ended up in an exhibition or a book. I mean, you know.
I mean, I know in passing, you know, some of the Antifa people. I've known Julia B. at the Black Lives Matters protest right there. I've known her for since she was a little girl, and she just happened to be. And actually, she got arrested like seconds after I took that picture.
Wow! So she'll remember that for the rest of her life.
Yeah, I gave her a print. They were doing. They do these block shutdowns.
Yeah.
And they were down on Lower Broadway and they shut down the block, and they set up a perimeter, and it's a very organized sort of thing. And yeah, they jumped in there and started arresting everybody right after I took that picture.
I remember one last thing I wanted to touch on, which I thought was really important, you know, and again, I keep going back to the fact that, yes, this project is not Nashville specific. The last couple of years have been very heavy. I know even my family, who are like religious devotees of CNN, you know, swore off watching the news. I think most people are completely and totally burned out by what's happening current event-wise. But you have a really great sense of humor when it comes to what's happened, from the title, which I love. I think is very cheeky, to just sort of your, I don't know, just your perspective on things. I'm curious why.
The project started out about, I guess, you know, probably a little under a year ago. I was kind of gathering stuff up, and at that time I was, you know, and still am really into Robert Frank, the Americans. And so I was kind of more, you know, kind of what would Robert Frank do, kind of focus on it. And so it was more a wider ranging bunch of material. It wasn't all political. There was this material was in there, but it was more wide range. And I titled it Robert Frankenstein at the time. And then as time went by, it was kind of too much of an inside joke, and I was kind of narrowing the focus down. And once I kind of narrowed it down to this, I was like, how do you lighten it up and make it more, you know, just give it more air, you know, less judgmental sort of thing. And so that's kind of how I got to Good Morning America, How Are You? And it really kind of came about because of David, who did the hand lettering. He had hand lettered that for a friend of his birthday. He's a hand letterer in town, David Wright. And I had seen it, and I was like, wow, that would make a great title for my book. And why doesn't he just letter it? So I had him letter it, and had him letter it directly on a print.
And the last thing I was going to say say is I find the fact that you wanted to do a book really interesting. I mean, again, we're in a world where it's like, and I know your Instagram feed is incredibly popular because when I started posting about the event, all my friends were like, oh my God, I love this stuff. There's something very cool about having this bound up into something tangible, and it could have not been. It could have just been fleeting images on Instagram.
Or it could just be a show on its own.
Yeah, I'm wondering why that was important.
Yeah, I really
to
wanted
you.
to do a book. I've done some smaller kind of zines in the past, and I wanted to do like a more kind of wide-ranging book, and it was more a book. So I probably will do more. And plus, again, my background is publishing and design, so it was kind of a no-brainer at that point of put together this book. And, the pacing and the way, especially the way a lot of the images play off of each other in a spread. It was really, really interesting as it fell together. It fell together pretty quickly. I mean, it wasn't. I didn't really belabor it too much.
So what would you want someone looking at this book to deduce from it?
Just like, wow, what a weird world. It's not a, I don't want them to think that it's a scary world, but you could probably deduce that from it. They're just like, wow, just super diverse people doing things in the world today.
No, that's great. I like that. What a weird world. Yeah, better than what a crappy world.
No, I think it's hopefully it's positive. I don't know. It may not strike some people that way.
Yeah, I thought it was a very interesting, accurate, sort of wide-ranging representation.
Yeah.
And me having not attended a lot of political events, it was like I got to catch up on them over the last 4 years.
Yeah, this is like the range of political events is, from, the one I went to was I guess it was basically it was a vigil after the Pulse shooting in Florida. And boy, just super sober. I've got a shot of just the crowd and people are just holding candles looking devastated. Just really powerful stuff. To the Kids Against Gun Violence, that was very, it was a heavy subject, but it was all kids, very upbeat, and, great signs. I mean, they were, it's interesting, some of these protests, the sign game is really strong.
They're trying to compete against each other.
Oh my gosh, there's sign painting parties the night before, there's a whole culture around all that.
So what's next? Are you going to keep shooting? I know that you still shoot every day, right?
I shoot every day, yeah.
Yeah. Will this continue to be your subject matter? You're so good at the portraiture.
I mean, I go out and shoot every day, and even as I shot this stuff, I'll have a whole repertoire of stuff I'm shooting on any day going around the same block. I'm shooting, reflections in glass, anything's interesting. I'm just keep shooting. And, I was looking through some stuff yesterday that I just can't post and would never post, but I'm going to shoot it anyway. It's just, there's a lot of things like that. I wouldn't, for a lot of reasons, we should never post. But, I'm just constantly shooting anything and everything that's out there. There's no indiscriminately.
Well, you've left us very intrigued, the stuff that he doesn't want to post. Well, awesome. Well, thank you for taking us through your journey.
Okay.
And any questions? No? All right, cool. Well, thank you.
Thank you for hosting.
Yeah, no, my pleasure.
Thank you so much
Thank you.
to both of you for having this conversation. It's been really a great time and I think very informative also.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Thank you.